Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here today. I'm going to take my keys out of my pocket so I don't stab myself. This talk is being videotaped so that I can send it to the diocese to see if they want to use it, because I can't be a lot of places at one time. I am Dr. John Littell. I'm a family physician. Happy to be a family doctor. How many here are in the medical field by show of hands, or want to be? Oh, that's going to be great. I think you're all going to enjoy the talk. I know this has been a journey for me. I mean, I've been in medicine for 36, probably more years than that, and I never stop learning. Jason, do I have that? My clicker. Here's the infamous clicker. Thank you. So one of the things I've learned to do with this talk, which I've been giving for decades now, with my wife initially, and yes, my wife Kathleen, I met her in the Army. We were both stationed at Fort Lewis. Any military here at all? Ooh-ah? All right, good job, guys. Oh, I know about that Marine back there. We have been blessed. My wife is a pediatric nurse. I met her during my internship year at Fort Lewis, Washington. We've been blessed with 4 wonderful daughters, a wonderful son, and then we picked up another son along the way that we've adopted into our family. And the amazing thing is that this is the 4th consecutive talk that I've given to one of my kids who's preparing for marriage. How's that sound? Can you imagine 3 daughters getting married within the same 12 months? That crazy? And I'm still standing, but we got 2 to go. We've only had 1. And then our adopted son is getting married in May in the middle of all that. That's the 4th. So it's a particular blessing when you have family at these talks. But thank you all for coming. As I say, my wife and I have been blessed with children. We also had 6 miscarriages, guys. And I'm going to be talking a lot about this idea that don't presume that every pregnancy is going to go well, because everybody in this room, every one of you knows someone who's had a miscarriage, including possibly yourself. And the most frustrating for me, I think, as a doctor, is hearing how few doctors know how to prevent miscarriages. I just got a call yesterday from an OBGYN in Montana, where my wife is from, who got to know me through other stuff. And he said, John, do you know of an OBGYN in West Palm for my daughter who's had 2 miscarriages? He said, no one will take care of her to prevent another miscarriage. Well, we're going to talk about how you can prevent that. That's just one of the little things. This talk has gone from introduction to natural family planning to reclaiming the good, the beautiful, and the true. You will hear about that. You might have heard about this morning. That is what our faith is all about. And if you're going to be a good doctor, right? Good doctor is good morals, and good morals is our faith, right? And we're going to hear a lot about the connections in this next 40 minutes or so. Right this moment, let's think about this. You know, every single moment we have is a gift from God. That's true in your marriage. It's true when you're arguing with each other. It's true when you're, grumpy. It's true when you're ecstatic. It's true when babies are coming to the world. It's true when I was at the bedside right here of a gentleman who died just 2 days ago. I walked in just as he was taken off life support. He was done. He fought the good fight. And I said to the wife, he's going to be gone in a couple of minutes. And he didn't close his eyes. He looked up and he lifted his hand and he died, which you see a lot when you're with people. And I say it's the most amazing thing as a doctor to be with people at that moment when they're meeting God and when those babies are coming into the world, right? These are moments that are precious, but then there's all these relatively mundane moments. Do not waste the moment, because every moment is graced. All is graced. I remember a priest friend of mine, I was in seminary for a year, when he was ordained, on the back of his card, he said, be joyful, and keep in mind the duty of delight, for all is grace. Everything is gift. This moment with you is a gift to me. God comes to witness each moment. Your marriage will be filled with moments that you're not going to you'll look back. I look back at 36 years with my wife, and I'm thinking, golly, the moments we've had. The interesting thing is, trying to understand where Jesus is present in your marriage can be difficult, because we can all go and receive communion or go to confession or kneel before the tabernacle and experience Christ. It gets to be challenging, honestly, really, truly challenging when you're having discussions with your spouse to understand that Jesus is still present there. And those discussions can be about a lot of things, including sexuality, which one of my future sons-in-law said, oh, you have to give the sex talk. I prefer to think of it as a love talk. This is the love talk, okay? Love one another as I have loved you. That's really We're going to come back to that at the end. You guys, did you already do the love languages, Jason? You know, that idea of service to each other is really a big deal when it comes to the good, the beautiful, and the true when it comes to human sexuality. So here we go, guys. Modern medicine is a wreck. And if you look at any of my talks I've given, modern medicine is not what it was when I thought I was going to be a doctor and wanted to be a doctor literally 60 years ago and became a doctor. I love being a doctor. But medicine now today is about vaccinating, it's about medicating, it's about operating, it's about do, get paid, get paid, get paid, but rarely, if ever, educating, for which you get paid zip. Are there any educators in the room, teachers? All right, you don't get paid the big bucks like the procedural people who go out and do in healthcare. And honestly, all this goes back, just real quickly, to 1965. We had a president named Johnson who started this program called Medicare. It was called the Great Society. And when they created Medicare, they said, we're going to reimburse doctors more for doing than for thinking. And that was the beginning of the end. Tack onto that the Obamacare, where they said to doctors, you know, we're going to teach you to be like a bunch of trained monkeys and just fill out a bunch of codes. And if you want to get paid, the more codes you put in, the better. It's really discouraging at times. I don't tell people not to become doctors. I say become doctors and make it a better profession. Bring back the profession that it was really when I was a kid, and it still can be. I try to make it that way. Ben Franklin, you all heard about good old Ben? He was very prescient many years ago when he said there's a great deal of difference between a good physician and a bad physician, but very little difference between a good physician and no physician at all. Don't you love that one? As I often say to patients, I'm trying to do for you what nature would do if nature could do it. That's what Hippocrates said before Christ. And yet we get in the way. When you're all getting ready to have your babies, you don't want a doctor who intervenes and says, oh, we better rush it to a C-section. No, you want a doctor who's going to say, listen, let's try to have this baby naturally. Breastfeeding, rearing children. Again, it's better to do nothing, which requires more thinking but creates less of an impression, than to do something which requires less thinking but creates a greater impression. So let me just bring that back to home. When I got out of the military and learned all the right ways to be a doctor and enjoyed being a physician in the military, because in the military there's no financial incentive to do more, right? I got paid what a captain in the medical corps or a major in the medical corps gets paid. Well, I got my first job as we were waiting to go to Montana, to a rural community there, in an urgent care in Augusta, Georgia, right outside of where Fort Gordon was. And I got fired from that job after 2 months, which was kind of like crazy. I mean, fired as a doctor. And the guy brought me and he said, Dr. Littell, you're spending a lot of time with patients talking about why their kids don't need antibiotics and why they don't need antibiotics. Well, then they're going to the next urgent care down the road and getting them. And it's bad business. I mean, it's good medicine, but it's bad business. This is the physician head of the urgent care. So you understand, guys, you all don't fall prey to this idea. And when we talk about women's health care right now, we're going to talk a lot about doctors not doing anything to you anymore. And I'm going to guarantee you that most of the women in this room have been victims of bad doctors who didn't think they were bad doctors, because I never thought I was a bad doctor before I learned how to be the better doctor that I think I am today. The healthiest women in the world are those who live the furthest away from hospitals, doctors, prescription drugs, okay? Doesn't mean they don't have medical, these women are in Okinawa. I know at least one person in this room that might be going there on military duty, but Okinawa, these women live because of their lifestyles to be 100 years old. Not every woman in Okinawa, but you catch my drift, right? This is what makes your future spouse, your wife, the woman that she is. And I'm going to guarantee you that the medical profession has been spending decades since the 1960s trying to figure out the best way to dismantle the women in your life, the best way to rob women of fertility. And we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I can tell you in my medical school years and my residency years, it was like you have to put every teenager on contraception. I remember having that conversation as an intern at Fort Lewis with other residents. They say, they have a baby, get them right on contraception right away. They come in at 17 years old, get them on contraception. Right? And I was, a young guy, I didn't know. I mean, I figured this is what we have to do, but I couldn't, something here said this is wrong. But the brain was being programmed by the teachers and the people who actually graded us and said, you're a good resident if you put people on contraception. If you go on contraception, you're not going to be this woman. You're not going to have the ups and downs of the estrogens and progesterone. You just aren't. That's a normal reproductive cycle. This is what happened back in the 90s especially. This is actually from 2000. All over medicine, and then they put it in the lay literature, get rid of your periods, say goodbye to Aunt Flo. Athletes were loving this stuff, especially tennis players on the circuit, and everyone was like, oh, I don't have to have a period anymore, and that's normal, The continuous oral contraception, take a pill every day, don't even have, all oral contraception is destroying your cycle, but now you can take it every day and never even have a bleed, and you call that normal, and somehow that's better. Seasonal was the first one, which would give, at the end of that, you see 4 periods a year. Well, how about no periods? Well, they did that too, with lots of methods. And then they have this is what we call a throwaway journal in medicine, where you get freebie stuff. This is the female patient. It's still out there today. It's a bunch of eugenicists, pro-abortion people, doctors who write. But Deborah Gordon wrote, hey, look at this. That women today without contraception will menstruate 450 times in their lifetimes from the age of 12 to 50, let's say. But our ancestors only had 160 periods. Okay, let's try to mimic what our ancestors from the beginning of time had 160 periods. So why do you suppose they didn't have as many periods during their reproductive lives? Huh? What's the reason why they would not have periods? Thank you. They were pregnant. Infant mortality is quite high, so there were lots of pregnancies, and then what did they do after they had their babies? How they feed them? They breastfed them. So it gets me so ticked off, because now they say, let's put women on birth control to mimic that, as though that's going to be good. And then the Dr. Kaunitz out of Jacksonville and then University of Florida, the worst guy with all of this stuff, and he's still in practice today to my knowledge. Oh, people are going to argue that it's unacceptable to women for cultural reasons or because of the belief that somehow it's not natural. What is going on in the heads of these guys? Well, don't look too far, because it's everywhere in medicine. It's everywhere in the world right now. The world is just crazy. What people think is good, and it's not good. So again, these long-acting reversible contraceptives that some of you have been victimized with, they're not really reversible, by the way. They're long-acting for sure, but once you take these things out or stop, you may be infertile for life, because frankly, you're a 15-year-old girl, and they're putting in implants in your arm, or they're putting in IUDs in your uterus, or they're putting Depo-Provera in your rear end, and then you come off of it when you're 25, and there's nothing happening. You've got nothing, no cycles, and you're wondering, did that cause it? Or maybe I had fertility problems to begin with. This is the kind of scandalous, horrendous stuff that doctors have been doing for decades, in addition to taking the birth control pill every single day without the withdrawal bleed. Either way, they're terrible. This is was an eye-opener for me. When I first came to town, I went around town to try to meet the doctors, and one of them was an OBGYN here in the community, and he had these brochures. So I took them from his waiting room, and I put them and I took a picture. These are the IUDs that some of you have in right now, because we've been told it's such a wonderful thing to take away your period, and women love not having their menses, right, supposedly. But look at the names: Kylena, Skyla, Mirena. And tell me they're not focusing on a particular audience here, a particular demographic. Just think about this. And look at that one in the middle. This is my baby right now, pushing a camera in a baby swing. Wow. I don't have to say any more. I love pushing my kids on swings. Swing high to the sky, look at how the birdies fly. I sing that with the kids. So I'm asking, I'm begging, I'm imploring all of you today, if nothing else, get back to the woman that God wants you to be. It's a funny thing. I've given this talk a lot, and Jason knows I had heart surgery in January, and I swear it's given me a tender heart. So I'm going to come back to normal here. All right, there we go. I'm going to go sue that doctor for giving me a tender heart. All right, here we go. So this is how my wife and I learned about natural family planning decades ago. Okay, when some of you weren't even born, obviously, but But we had stamps. We didn't have apps and cell phones and all that stuff. We had stamps, and we would put red stamps for bleeding days and the white and the baby stamps for when she knew she was fertile. And I'm going to go over some of that with you today. The biggest thing to understand, or one of the big things, is that your ovaries during the course of the cycle are going to be stimulated by the brain, what's called the follicle stimulating hormone at the top. You are born, young ladies, when you're born, you have over 300,000 oocytes, primitive egg cells, okay? Those, so 360 times, let's say during your, however many cycles you have, one of those is going to be selected out from the brain communicating with the ovary to become the primary follicle that's producing the estrogen that gave you that big estrogen surge that you get before you ovulate. After ovulation, then you have a different hormone called luteinizing hormone that kicks into play from the brain to the ovary that causes you to produce progesterone. It's the corpus luteum, although in Latin that means yellow body, which is why it's depicted as yellowish here. That's your normal cycle. That's what the ovary is going to do time and time again. And of course, there are women with polycystic ovaries who don't ovulate, and those are the women that we deal with a lot. I talk about it in my book that you all can get in other conditions. But if you're on birth control continually, you'll never know if you have any of these issues, right? You want to have this reproductive cycle. You want to have a nice, healthy lining to your uterus every cycle. The estrogen helps to develop the cycle during the proliferating phase. After ovulation, this is critical. You're going to hear a lot more about progesterone today. Progestation, all right? Progestation. It's for pregnancy. You don't have enough progesterone, you don't have a baby. You're going to lose the baby through miscarriage. This is the primary mechanism of action for all of the things out there that are preventing pregnancies right now, as we'll see. So the progesterone, if you look to the right, very critical to understand. You see those little blood vessels coming in. That's what the progesterone is doing, the secretory phase. It's actually allowing blood supply to come through into the developing placenta for that baby to be nourished, okay? So it's like watering the fields, allowing the baby to be nourished. You need progesterone. This is a slide of an actual cervix from the Creighton people in Omaha that I also learned from. Just kind of showing you in the second slide what that cervical mucus that's being produced by estrogen looks like. It's very important to understand when we talk about natural family planning that your body is doing things that every woman can understand. Every woman. Mother Teresa in India insisted that all her nuns learn the Billings method, which my wife and I learned, and then teach it to the people in the community as a way of preventing pregnancy. The people out of Australia who developed the Billings method were asked by the government of China to go teach people because the only compassionate side of China, they say you can only have one child per family, but rather than forced sterilization and infanticide, they say teach these women how not to have babies, and so that those things wouldn't happen. There was obviously a lot of interest in learning how to prevent pregnancy. But the mucus is coming down from the cervix where we get the pap smear, as you'll see later. And then by the fourth day after you ovulate, the opening to the cervix is actually shut. So no sperm can go in there. So when you're talking about natural family planning, it's really mostly detecting the early signs of fertility, that mucus, and then recognizing when the mucus is gone. You've dried up. Okay. This is what the cervical mucus looks like. And one of the methods, the Creighton model out there, you actually look and observe it. Let's face it, women know what's going on. If you pay attention to your bodies, when you're urinating, when you're on the toilet, on the toilet paper, you're gonna see this stuff. This is important. When I was in training to be a doctor and doing pap smears, no one taught me about this stuff. Most doctors don't talk about this stuff. They won't communicate to women, oh, you have a lot of fertility. I do now. But the point is, for me, it was just a nuisance. I'm in there, I'm doing a pap smear, and there's all this stuff. I had no idea what it meant. Most doctors have no clue what it means. I want you to understand, without that cervical fluid, your sperm will die. The sperm will die. If you're dry, the sperm will die. That's the thing to learn. This is one reason why that fluid is so important. This is an electron micrograph from two types of fluid taken from the woman's cervix. The first one, type B, is during the estrogen phase when you have that fluid coming down, usually a few days after your period ends. And then the second one is from a mucus plug that develops in the second half of the cycle. Look at the difference. You have around 10 million sperm per ejaculation, and they're going in and they're going to try to get through the cervix and make that journey through the uterus into the fallopian tube, as we'll see. Well, you can see on the left that what's happening is the sperm are going to swim through those channels. Let's think of the lanes of an Olympic swimming pool, right? The only difference between this and the Olympic swimming pool is there's these side branches that actually select out the sperm that have misshapen heads and, woeful tails, and they don't get into where they need to go. So it's, again, nature or God's way of trying to pick out the best, fastest swimmer of the sperm. You go to where you're infertile in the second half of the cycle, you have a mucus plug, and nobody, this is like a 300-pound linebacker you're running into. It ain't happen. You're getting nowhere. All right, so E is what you want. Estrogen, again, you want to have the estrogen, you want to have the fertile mucus. Women can learn this stuff. You all can learn when you're fertile. I mean, I know it. We used it, my wife and I used it for years, and we've been teaching it for years. This is what I just explained about where the sperm need to make the journey, going from the cervix on the bottom. Those little black things are a depiction of the crypts, or where the glands are that produce the cervical mucus. It goes up, there's a cutaway there to show the fallopian tube. Fertilization occurs at the end of the fallopian tube. The ovary is popping out the egg. It's captured by those tentacles that you see there, the fimbriae, and it comes in. And then you have to make the 5-day journey, roughly, and to be implanted in the wall. Why this is also important is understand that in the OBGYN community, they don't talk about fertilization as what you see right here. They actually have this misconstrued notion for 40 years now that the baby doesn't begin to live until it implants in the uterus. And that's why they justify a whole lot of bad stuff. If it can prevent implantation in the minds of the American College of OBGYNs, then it's not abortifacient. You're not killing a baby. Well, of course you are. The baby, the 23 chromosomes, and the 23 chromosomes match up right there, and that's where human life begins. Okay, let me go here to the next, and then the implantation is what we're trying to make sure happens so you don't have a miscarriage. This slide you can get online. You just look up progesterone curve in pregnancy. So if any of you have friends that are pregnant or plan on getting pregnant, I highly encourage you to look up progesterone curve in pregnancy and see that you start at a level of 20, and then by the time you're having that baby, your progesterone level is 170 or right about there. This is from the program in Omaha where I learned to help prevent miscarriages as well as help women with fertility and do some natural family planning stuff. But the key is most doctors don't do this. 99% of OBGYN do not ever monitor your progesterone level. It's just wing it. You're pregnant, let's wing it. You have a baby, good. You have a miscarriage, oh, probably something genetic. No, sorry, wrong answer. It's something you can prevent 99% of the time. In my experience, with adequate progesterone, you can prevent miscarriages. Your corpus luteum is not always healthy. It's, the ovaries aren't always kicking out the right amount of hormones. That's why you monitor. And this is a couple of slides on the things that are being done to destroy your fertility. Now, Plan B, how many of you heard of Plan B? Right, you know it's out there. You know it's over the counter, right? You can get it at Publix, you get it at Winn-Dixie, Walgreens. I was in Michigan when this first rolled out. Tell you how, just like I said, they changed the terms about when human life begins to implantation. This used to be called morning after pill, the morning after pill. Then they switched to emergency contraception, which is a totally false term. It's not contracepting when you've already had fertilization. Contraception is preventing fertilization, and if it's really truly contraceptive, that just means you had sex on a day when you're infertile and you wouldn't need this at all. If you had sex on a day when you're fertile, meaning the cervical mucus is there, the way this works is to prevent implantation, basically causing the earliest miscarriage you can have. So it's an over-the-counter miscarriage pill, all right? You'll have a little heavier period. You wonder why, you've miscarried your baby. You could use other terms for that aren't as nice, but this is what they're doing. So Plan B, not good. You're getting artificial steroid chemicals to interfere with the progesterone. This is an artificial progestin that blocks your progesterone from nourishing the baby as it's getting ready to implant 5 days after fertilization. Same thing with this. I had no idea until recently that contraception is now over the counter. Some of you may be on this. You can go buy this O-pill at Publix, Winn-Dixie, Walgreens. It's a once-a-day contraceptive. Who knew? I thought you had to get prescriptions for birth control pills, but since I haven't prescribed them in a couple of decades, but now you don't because you can get them all over the counter. You can go one step further. You can actually now get your chemicals in the mail from California and New York, and you can kill this baby or any baby up to whatever gestation you want. And believe me, I'm part of the Abortion Pill Reversal Network. I had a call just 2 weeks ago from a young lady in town who panicked. It was her third baby. She got the chemical abortion, which people have the nerve to call it medical abortion. It's nothing, it is medicines. She had taken it just because she was panicking. She's married, 2 kids, and then she called the abortion. She was 11 and a half weeks pregnant. This baby you're looking at right now is 12 weeks, okay? And unfortunately, she called too late. It was a weekend. We couldn't get the medicine to her. She passed this baby in the toilet, all right? Which is happening to tens of thousands of women in this country. It's the #1 way to kill babies. Abortion rates have not gone down in Florida or any state in the union because you can just get Amazon to deliver this. Well, you don't get it from Amazon. You get actually the post office is delivering it. We can't figure out how to stop it because it's the federal, it's postal, right? We can't stop the mail from going through. They take the pill, which again, mifepristone stops progesterone from doing its thing. It's going to stop that baby from being fed, even though it's this far along. And then the baby just kind of withers on the vine, but it dies, and then you pass it. It's not any, and many of these women end up in the hospital. So again, this takes me to, we're going to shift gears a little bit. I don't think anyone here endorses the transgender stuff, boys becoming girls, girls becoming boys, but this is just to remind you that, who was that guy that was on the Wheaties guy? I grew up watching the Olympics with Bruce Jenner. Okay, so Bruce Jenner is always going to be Bruce Jenner. I don't know, is he still alive, Caitlyn or whatever? Anyway, you can't stop what you've been in the womb. Your highest levels of testosterone until you reach puberty are in the mother's womb. These boys come out as boys. You're never going to change the fact that every chromosome in your body is a male chromosome if you're genetically male. So just don't fall for any of this nonsense. Boys don't become girls. Girls can't become boys. You are what you are. The rest is a mess, but we can get into that. The rest is kind of also biochemistry. You said some of you in the healthcare field, so I won't panic you by having you remember all of the chemistry. But these are the chemicals that make men and women what they are. We also don't have a good situation in our country right now, guys. I mean, I'm talking about women, but the male sperm counts are at an all-time low in all the civilized nations in this world. And I say civilized, first world countries, okay? You go to South America, you go to Africa, you go to, their sperm counts are fine. But in Europe and North America, the sperm counts have been falling. Lots of reasons why that could be happening, but don't assume that you're fertile. I see it a lot in my practice. Don't wait. Of course, just last week, the CDC came out. We now in America have the lowest fertility rate in the history of our country. So congratulations, America. It's 1.5 children per woman to replace. What number do you need to have to replace population? Anyone know? It's more than 1.5. It's more than 2, actually. It's 2.1 children. We're down to 1.5. And on the survey of Americans, it was the most women ever saying they don't want to have any children, ever. That, I call that the AOC factor. But there's a lot of people out there saying, don't have kids, it's not good. And that's, I think, over 50% of the couples thought it was not good to bring children in the world because for the future of our nation. I mean, that's crazy. So thank you guys for being here and being open to children, but we got work to do. All right. So I'm not going to, this is just to tell you, this is, when I was writing my book, a lot of it was going to be called Eve Destroyed, but really you understand we are having an all-out assault on women, on families, and there's something out there called eugenicists, if you're not familiar with eugenics, that basically, when I was at Cornell, I was taught by the population control strategist, his name is J. Myone Stikos, took a senior seminar with graduate students on population control. And little did I know until later in the course, he engineered the mass sterilization program in Puerto Rico back in the 60s. So he succeeded in convincing Catholic physicians in Puerto Rico that it was important to sterilize these women after you do the C-section. And I'll tell you, I could tell you more, but I mean, I've even had conversations with Bill Gates, which is in my book, not him personally, but his population control doctor, Malcolm Potts out of Berkeley. We spent 2 days off and on together, and he was so boastful of all the ways he's spending money in Africa to prevent women, young girls, from ever getting pregnant. And that was part of the program. It's called eugenics. The other thing that happens that people lie about has to do with pap smears. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes on pap smears, and you say, what does that have to do with natural family planning? The problem is women have been told that you need to see your doctor once a year, or now they'll say every 3 years, and I'm like, it's GYN, right? Family medicine I deliver babies. I was doing the same thing, all these pap smears. And then finally in the early 90s, I learned really what is this all about? Why are we doing this to women? Well, the point is, there's a lot of lying going on. For example, oral contraceptives increase the risk of cervical cancer. They double your risk. If you're on more than 5 years especially, they also double your risk of breast cancer. Every radiologist knows that. When I brought it up at a meeting on cervical cancer and pathology, I said, well, HPV is the cause of cervical cancer. You're going to learn about human papillomavirus. But I mentioned it at a conference, and people were saying, don't do the pap smears. Don't do the pap smears until they're 25 years old. I said, why are we not doing them? And if they're on the birth control pill, why aren't we telling them to get off? And he said, his answer, which is in my book, was let's keep that to ourselves. Because we don't want to frighten these young women into getting off the birth control pill, right? Their mother has a history of breast cancer. They're on the birth control pill. They're doubling their risk of breast cancer. We don't want to frighten them into getting off the pill, because what's worse than breast cancer? What's worse than cervical cancer? What's worse than depression? What's worse than weight gain? What's worse than not having your testosterone, estrogen, progesterone? What's worse than all of that is pregnancy, right? That's the idea. That's the idea. You get it? So we have been doing things. For example, virginal women and others with no risk of cervical cancer will still get pap smears because no one presumes that they're virginal. That was the other thing that came up in my book. I would go to a conference and say, why are we doing pap smears on virgins? And this one big guy, OBGYN, says, why do you believe your patients, Dr. Littell? I mean, you realize how many people won't tell you the truth? I mean, this is seriously their attitude. So presume that you're promiscuous, presume you need a pap smear, when in fact you can only get cervical cancer from HPV, all right? And there's, HPV also causes common warts, so I don't want you to think, the only ones that are sexually transmitted is about 13 types of the over 100 that cause other types of warts. But you can get it from any contact. So as I wrote in my book, if you're naked with a guy or vice versa, you can get HPV. You can get HPV anywhere where genitals come in contact with another person, okay? So men, however, you can't screen your future husband for HPV, sadly. You can screen them for everything else, and sometimes you want to do that, right? HIV, herpes, hepatitis B, even gonorrhea, chlamydia. HPV, there's no way to screen men. You just have to get that first pap smear. Now, and then what happens, I'll show you, it's very simple in a second, it's not a big deal. There's all kinds of lies out there. When they rolled out the vaccine, they said 80% of women will contract HPV. That was actually in the stuff that came to the doctor's office from Merck and from the CDC. It's the biggest lie of all, it's less than 5%. Where they came up with the 80% was a study at a family planning clinic with Planned Parenthood in the Northwest, and they looked at a bunch of women, promiscuous, and 20% had HPV, and they extrapolated from the 20% at the STD clinic that, if they're 20 and 20%, then by the time they're 50, 80%. It was the most incredible, obnoxious lie I've seen in medicine practically. Obviously, you don't have it for life. If you get HPV, you can lose HPV. You just got to come off of birth control pills. You got to not smoke, and you got to be not promiscuous. Those are the, monogamous or abstinence. You can get, and oral cancer and anal rectal cancers from HPV has to do with sexual lifestyles. When I first came to town, I went to a meeting of the health department. Again, a lot of you in healthcare. So this lovely lady came and talked to all the nurse practitioners. It seemed like mostly nurse practitioners. I was the only doctor anyway, about why they need to do these, give HPV vaccines to kids. Now, how many of you know what the age is to start giving HPV vaccine? How old? 10, yeah, that's a good guess. 9, actually, it's approved for 9 and older. So picture your 9-year-old little boy or little girl going into the pediatrician's office, and the pediatrician or whoever it is says, you need to get a shot against HPV. And the health department lady said, don't say it's a vaccine against an STD. You say it's a vaccine against cancer. And if you've seen the commercials, which I have incredible commercials, you want your kid to have cervical cancer, you're a responsible parent, I wish my dad had given me an HPV vaccine because now I have cervical cancer. Well, you can't get this stuff unless you become sexually active. And if you're a woman and you're engaging in normal sexual relations, then you can just get a pap smear. And as I'll show you later, you can get rid of HPV easily. So you don't vaccinate tens of millions of children against a disease that's possibly going to affect 1 out of 10 million. You can't get cervical cancer unless a person has never had a chance to have a pap smear. They're living in, I don't know where they'd be living, probably Okinawa maybe, but they're not getting HPV in Okinawa. All right, so that's pretty crazy. Don't call it a vaccine against cancer. And of course, if you refuse vaccines for your kids, you're considered a criminal. And many places, they call Child Protective Services. It happens. It's happened a lot. All right. I want to show you what HPV looks like, and I've done colposcopies a lot, which is the procedure where you look at the cervix. All you do, it says acetic acid, basically that's vinegar, okay? You put a little vinegar on the cervix, it turns white, and guess what you do? Just like with warts on the skin, you know how you treat warts on the skin? You freeze them. We have a freezing thing that just freezes that. It peels off the outer layer. Bye-bye HPV, okay? So HPV is not something you have to get and die from. When they talk about women dying from HPV, those are women who, for whatever reason, became sexually active and never got evaluated. Every sexually active woman needs to be evaluated. So, again, if you've been exposed to a sexually transmitted disease, any contact, when you get a PAP, believe it or not, there's doctors out there still working who don't understand HPV and they won't check for HPV, but you have to insist, if you've been sexually active, I want to know my HPV status. I mean, just like men who have sex with men want to know their HIV every year, right? I mean, you should know your HPV status. If it's negative, guess what? You tell your doctor, hey, you go back next year and they say, we're going to do a PAP. And they say, no, I'm married and HPV is negative. Oh, it's time for your pap smear. No, you say, well, why are you doing that? Well, we're screening for cervical cancer. Well, how do I get cervical cancer? Well, it's HPV. But you said I don't have HPV. Well, you don't, but you could have it now. Well, no, I couldn't because we're married and I'm monogamous. So you have to educate your doctors. All right, so they don't offer it because they're ignorant, and that says that. So now we get into the final part of the presentation. Thank you. This is hard. It's after a break. I know it's after lunch. It's a lot of information. It's like a fire hose. I'm coming at you. That's why you're all going to get it. If you want a copy of my book, it's free. It's my gift. Believe it. I took years. What I'm telling you now took years for me to figure out because I'm a very stubborn guy. Are there any other stubborn men in this room? Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, good. We're all going to confession for being too stubborn. But no, I'm super stubborn, and when I learned how to be a good doctor, and I got out of medical school, and then I got a residency, and then I was in the Army, I was like the best. You couldn't tell me I was doing anything wrong. I mean, you just alluded to that, Jason, in that last segment. So I was fixing things, I knew how to fix things, don't tell me I don't know how to fix things. It really took my wife and I having 3 kids in 5 years, is what happened, right? And she's going for her master's in Georgia, and I'm thinking, and she's thinking, what am I going to do with a master's degree? And I just keep having babies, okay? We got to figure this out. And this is in 1995. That shows how old I am, all right? And she's still super young, my wife. But anyway, she is. But the coolest thing is that we were at a time in our life where we could travel, thanks to the military, which has a cushy lifestyle, guys. Right? Cushy lifestyle. No, I was able to get time off. It's so much easier than me now in private practice anyway. I could get time off to go to seminars and learn more. And I went all over the country and learned these methods, learned all the methods that were available. And so I'm sharing that with you now. The symptothermal, I learned from couple to couple league. It combines taking temperatures in the morning to see if there's a degree, it goes up, and you combine it with the cervical mucus, and I have a typo there, and there's other observations. Then I went to Minnesota and Denver, and we learned the Billings method from people from Australia who taught us all you have to know is how to know when you're wet, when you have the cervical mucus. Kathleen, my wife, and I, we kind of don't like to do a lot of stuff. We're kind of intuitive. We don't like a lot of data, so we didn't like the temperature thing. We liked this because all she had to do was put on a little calendar that she was, after her period, that she put a W for wet, and I knew that she was having that. And then after it dries up, you're good to go. And it's really more of a sensation than it is even looking at the cervical mucus. Dr. Tom Hildress in Omaha created the Creighton model, which involves actually measuring the cervical mucus, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And that's cool. If you want to do that, if you're really analytical, you like more data, you will see the changing pattern of fertility. And then a really cool dude, Richard Ferring, who's a nurse. I don't know if he's still with us or not. He was out of Marquette. He was just the greatest guy about using all the methods, and he said, hey, why don't we get an ovulation monitor, which is what they wanted, and combine it, and that's the Marquette model. And you can go buy that anywhere, right? So you just correlate, you have the mucus observations, you check for the ovulation. When the ovulation happens, how long does the egg survive after ovulation? This is a critical thing. I want everyone to remember this. How long is the egg going to be alive? 1 day, 24 hours. So chances are when you check it and it says it's positive, it's already been around a few hours, but to be safe, 24 hours, you will not get pregnant if you've ovulated 24 hours. There's no double ovulations. How long can the sperm survive in good cervical mucus? I don't want you to leave without knowing this. Cool, 5 days, maybe 6. Someone very close to me recently got married and had not yet ovulated, and knew she hadn't ovulated. And on the night of their wedding, 2 weeks later, she realized she had gotten pregnant. She was pregnant 2 weeks later, and she says, I don't know how that happened. I hadn't even ovulated. I said, you remember, he must have really healthy sperm, and you have really good cervical mucus, because the sperm go up, and they hang out, and they wait for you to ovulate. I like to joke, they hang out around the cervix in those little crypts, and they're like a sperm hotel, and they watch football, and they smoke cigars, and they wait for ovulation, and bingo, they're up there, and they get that great cervical mucus, the Olympic swimming pool, and they're there. So that's why mucus is so important. You will get pregnant if you have intercourse when you're having cervical mucus present. You just have to understand when that happens. Marquette model. This I'm going to skip over. This is what used to be when in the dark ages my wife and I used stamps. But just to give you a little idea, and these are not our stamps. That would be like, what they say, 2 TMI or something like that. Anyway, this is not us. This is actually an Australian chart. But they had red stamps for bleeding, and then there was I for intercourse, and then the next day there was something. Then I for intercourse, and the next day there was something, there was seminal fluid, but then all of a sudden they got into that pattern where they could see that cervical mucus that they recognized more and more, gets stretchier, gets slippery at the end. See at the end, day 14, it says slippery, clear, then slippery. That slippery sensation is like holding a fish out of water. It's unique. Women can recognize this stuff. And then all of a sudden there's a sudden drop with that estrogen coming down, progesterone kicks in, you dry up. If you're doing the Marquette model during those baby stamp days, you'll actually see the ovulation test go positive. You won't need to wait the extra 3 days that we were taught because we couldn't predict really the ovulation had happened. It could be a day or so later. So I'm saying Marquette, you get a little less abstinence if you want to go that. But after the 3rd dry day, you can have eyes. I'm surprised they only had 3 eyes. They could have had all those eyes there. But anyway, they stopped after 3 days. Okay, so that's how you would think about it. All right, that's Creighton. I met the lady, Mercedes Wilson, who taught this in the Third World in Guatemala, and she would just use this analogy, dry days you're barren, wet days you're fertile. But the caveat being that after ovulation, the next day you could still be ovulating. The egg lives 24 hours, so don't assume the first dry day especially. Okay, we're on the end stretch here. We got a quarter lap to go. So thanks for being with me. These last slides I think are important just to help understand what's happening with natural family planning. There's a whole bunch of methods out there, and actually people seriously argue over which one is best, because they have a lot invested in their program and other reasons. But I'm going to tell you, it's whatever is best suited to you, your personalities. As I said earlier, some people are analytical and like a lot of data. Others are lazy and intuitive, like my wife and I. We want the least amount of data that works. And then if you're open to life, God bless you, right? You just want to know. But at some point in time, there may be a serious reason to avoid having children. It could be health. It could be a lot of stuff. But there's a lot of tension, all right? A lot of tension. My wife and her friends, when they were first learning this, they said, this is unnatural. Why is it unnatural? Because remember the estrogen? I talked about progesterone and progestation, but I didn't talk about estrogen. The word estrogen comes from the word estrus. And estrus in Greek means mad desire. Mad desire. Women who have high levels of estrogen, I can think of a lot of words, but among them, they're interested in sex, okay? And they're happy to be, it's a good time, all right? As a, PMS, everything bottoms out. The estrogen's coming down, the progesterone's coming down. Women, after they have babies, things come down. But the estrogen, when it's at its highest, it is kind of unnatural. God said, be fruitful and multiply, and he meant it. He meant it. He doesn't just kid around. You're going to have babies, and you're going to want to have babies, and I hope you have babies, and I hope you do it all in a natural way. The world has gone crazy right now. This world that we live in, as I say daily in my practice, the devil has never been more manifest in my life than he is right now. In politics, in religion, in everything, everywhere you turn. So the world is crazy. We need to be the difference. You guys are the light, right? In the darkness, you're the salt. So you're trying to be, psychosexual development is a must for life in general. I have a 17-year-old son. He went to his first prom this last week, and the girl was very appropriately dressed. And it was so cute because I've never met this girl, but we said, one of us said, is that your girlfriend now? And he said, well, I guess after the prom, she's my girlfriend, but it's like, it's such an innocent, wonderful thing, but it's not the way the world is. We need to teach, but I am teaching him, and thank God he listens. You don't have sex until you're married. Well, he's 17. How long do you think that's going to be? 10 years, 20 years could be. How long do I need to be able to wait to have sex as a married man if I want to avoid children, right? 7 days, maybe? 7 days, okay? So if we guys can't wait 7 days and be psychosexually mature enough to do that, we aren't really good role models. All right, love and self-control, big deal. You heard about the love languages, and so I won't belabor that, but that agape love, that giving of yourself that Jesus modeled for us, love one another as I have loved you, right? And the theology of the body is basically saying the same thing, treating each other that way. This is fascinating stuff. I think, let's let these words sink in for just a second, okay? And then I got a couple of slides. Because of artificial birth control, the man may finally lose respect for the woman and no longer caring for her physical and psychological equilibrium, your balance, may come to the point of considering her as a mere instrument of selfish enjoyment and no longer as his respected and beloved companion. Do you think that's happening in society today? Do you think women have been objectified more than ever? I mean, more than ever. I mean, big time. And I have 4 daughters, and I've always said, to protect them from this incredible thing. Well, who said these prophetic words? Look what else he said. This birth control could become a dangerous weapon in the hands of eugenicists, for sure. Those public authorities who take no heed of moral exigencies. There's no moral compass anymore, all right? Well, the person who wrote this in 1968 was our Pope Paul VI, on human life, Humanae Vitae, who argued, believe me, you got to look at the history of this church's teaching on contraception and realize that the American church, majority of the American church went against him in the 60s. And many, many others from the so-called, civilized parts of the world said, no, we want birth control for our couples because they're coming to us asking for it. We hate to let them. And now he said, no, you do that, it's going to be a slippery slope. And that slippery slope this is a recent from the Pew Research. Some of you may have seen this on the radio, the morals in America. Americans are even split on whether viewing pornography or having abortions is morally wrong. If you look there, using contraceptives, not morally wrong. On the second bottom is 91% say it's not morally wrong. Only 8% say it's morally wrong. Twice as many who think eating meat is morally wrong, But look at there. I mean, getting a divorce everything's over 50%, except for having an affair while you're married. For whatever reason, the majority of people thought that was wrong, but everything else is good. Everything else is good. Having an abortion, homosexuality, the death penalty, gambling. Anyway, it's just not a good situation. Anything goes. Any of you ever heard that song? Anything goes. The world has gone mad today, and good's bad today, and black's white today, and day's night today. When most gals today, something like that. I forgot the words. What did you know? It's Cole Porter anyway. He wrote, isn't it right? The world has gone mad today, and day's night today. I'm sorry that, that's a downer, but here's something that I think is kind of good to think about. Pregnancy, right? When a woman is pregnant, she's not expecting a child. She already has one. She's not going to be a mother. I have to change that when I see women who are pregnant. I no longer write, "Are you expecting?" in the chart. I say, so when's the little baby due out? When are we going to see the baby? The baby's not on the way. The baby's already arrived. We have to change the way we talk about unborn children, right? So let's start today thinking about all the lies I share with you. Think about this quote from St. Augustine, because I think this is where it all comes kind to rest. "You've made us for yourself, O Lord. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." And I sense, among you guys, I know it was for me as we were getting married, you really are restless. We've been looking for love in all the wrong places sometimes. Been in bad relationships, been raised in a home with troubles, to say the least. And now you're coming to roost in your marriage. You're going to be in a marriage that's going to be blessed by God. You have the sacrament. You have Jesus every moment. So all that other stuff, and believe me, as a family doctor, if you don't think I deal with this stuff, every day of my practice, I'm dealing with somebody with PTSD who's trying to make it work. And some of them don't even realize that the way they grew up was not normal. They thought everybody grew up with child protective services in their home, or the police, or alcoholism, or whatever. It was like they don't understand, and I'm like, no, the reason you're having these issues today in your marriage is because you had bad role models, and those bad role models had even probably worse experiences than you had growing up. So work through that, work through it, and recognize the only way we're ever going to get rest in our world, in our lives, in our marriages, is by coming to Christ and recognizing that babies are a gift from God. Now, it's still the Easter season, so hallelujah. And the one in the middle is actually my son. You see the resemblance? Yeah, that's Thomas. Look at his best. And those are my two grandchildren that have already arrived, Stella and Kelly on the right. And the third one's already here, but due to appear in August, the one, and more on the way. It's funny, I asked Kelly just this morning, we were reading a book called about a bear and a squirrel, and they were best friends. I asked Kelly, who goes to a little school, "Who's your best friend? Do you have a best friend?" "Yeah, I have a best friend. It's Stella." He didn't see Stella, she's down in West Palm, but that's his cousin. It's kind of cool when family is your best friend. So, St. Michael the Archangel, let's pray this together, okay? In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen. St. Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl through the world seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Thank you for your attention. It's hard, and I'll be praying for each of you. You pray for me, and I'll let you all figure out which one of my children is in your group today, but it's a tall Marine back there. So, all right, and his lovely bride to be my daughter. All right, God bless. I'm over here. Thank you.